name is Peter, and this is the Esoteric Order of Gamers. A very hearty welcome to you. Thanks for watching my channel. Now today it's a very exciting day because we're going to be looking at, wait for it, Warhammer the Horus Heresy, Legions Imperialis. Here it is. I've been waiting for this for ages because I've always wanted Games Workshop to go back into the epic scale Warhammer 40k. Now, I go way back with Epic 40k. In fact, what have I got here? It's Adeptus Titanicus, released in 1988. And wow, I really remember this coming out. I was so excited about it because it had giant robots and big polystyrene buildings in it. It was a great game, and we used to play it quite a bit back in the day. And this was sort of the start of the whole epic scale thing. Not only was it the start of the epic scale thing, but it was the start of the whole Horus Heresy idea in the Games Workshop Warhammer 40k background. And that's because, I'm sure you've heard this story before, they didn't have the budget to make two different types of Titans, so they made the same amount of Titans and came up with the idea of a civil war to justify it. And that's where the whole Horus Heresy thing started. So, very excited. Now, just before I go on, because I'm already running off at the mouth and getting into detail, Games Workshop sent me this for free, as they often do. They send me stuff to review and show to you. I don't charge for these videos. My opinions are always my own, but you know, I go way back with Games Workshop and I love their stuff. I realise also that they're incredibly expensive, and I don't know the retail cost for this, but it probably costs a bomb. But it's a whole new game system. If you want to get into it, that's the price you pay, unfortunately. So let's look into the box. Let's talk about Epic. Let's talk about why this game was delayed, because I can tell you that. Well, no, I can't tell you exactly why, but I can tell you what happened. And we're just going to talk about Legions Imperialis and the Epic system as a whole. Right, let's get started. Okay, so I was talking about Adeptus Titanicus. That was 1988. Well, the year following that, 1989, they came up with Space Marine, and that's when they started doing all the tiny little Space Marines and doing the whole Epic system. Very exciting stuff, and I actually played Epic more than I did the large-scale version back in the day. I don't know why. I just like the whole idea of the big armies, you know, and the big scale of everything. So that was cool, and then it went into a second edition, and it was starting to get kind of complicated and unwieldy and huge. With the second edition, they had a separate box called Titan Legions, which covered Titans, and it had these huge Titans in it. The Empire one, Imperial one, and the Orc one. There's two Orc ones. These really big ones. I don't know if you've seen, well, they had these buildings and things as well. I'm storing the actual Titans somewhere else. I haven't even painted them yet, so that's how old it is, and I bought this at the time. Unfortunately, I don't have my old Space Marine boxes, edition 1 and 2. When I got onto Epic 40k, which was way in the future in 1997, and I really love this game system, I basically folded the last two boxes miniatures-wise into this one and then didn't keep most of the stuff. I think I kept some of the buildings and things, but everything went. A decision I now regret, of course. I would love to go back and get the old Space Marine boxes, and I will one day, except they cost a fortune on eBay. But I like to put them together. I've got this thing of like putting together old sets of Games Workshop stuff and getting them back to their original condition, because I've got such a large collection of the old box sets. It's really nice to do it. So one day when I have some spare cash, I will get those two Space Marine boxes back into their old condition. Anyway, Epic 40k really slimmed down the whole system, and I really like this version of the game. I think it's great. If you want to watch a battle report of Epic 40k, just go to this link, wherever it appears, and go and check out the battle report I did with my good friend Will, and it's a lot of fun, as you can tell. And I want to talk about Epic 40k and a little contrast with this new version. Now, Epic 40k didn't do very well, and it's because they simplified the whole system and they made it more general. Now, for me, that made it a better playing game. It was more enjoyable and went faster and all the rest of it. But all the people who were supporting Games Workshop at the time loved all that fiddly little detail, so it didn't go well at all, and they canned it. And then Epic 40k went on to other variations. Epic 40k Armageddon, there was an online fan version. So it's sort of survived in many different forms over the years. But in all that time, for some strange reason, well, not all that time, because Games Workshop And Citadel did release models for Epic 40k for a while to support Epic 40k Armageddon. But there was no official game out there anymore. So it's taken this long, to 2023, to get to Legions Imperialis. So first we're going to unbox it and just have a look, and so you can see what you get in the set. So let's open up this box. Now, the first thing, before I open it, look at the cover. Now, I don't know about you, but to me it's a bit dull. And, you know, I'm going to say good things and bad things about this set. And one of the things is that I find the whole look of the Horus Heresy kind of dull. And I don't know why they've done this. I think it's to appeal to the more, to use a hackneyed term, grognard type players. The ones who love all the real detail, who like to go back to the old systems of playing, probably the older players in general, really, and those who are younger and like more crunchy detail. So, for example, Games Workshop are working up to release a new version of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which is the game that did the fantasy gaming before Age of Sigmar. And that is obviously going to be right back to the early versions of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. It's got tables and it's got lots of extra crunchy rules and all that kind of thing. So it really appeals to those kind of gamers. In the same way, the Horus Heresy, Age of Darkness and Legions Imperialis are very much going this route. But for some reason, I just find it all a bit drab. The graphic design is not great, and it's not up to the standard of Games Workshop's other stuff, in my opinion. And only because it's a bit sort of dull, so it doesn't fill me with the same excitement that this did. I mean, check it out. This is exciting. I look at that box and I go, wow, I really want to play that. It's so cool, it's colourful, there's so much going on, there's action, there's excitement. And then we look at this cover, and it's like tanks and titans sort of drudging towards. It's more like World War One, you know. It's like they're getting stuck in the mud and trudging over the lines. I mean, it's grim and it's dark, but it's not very exciting, is it? Is that just me? Would you agree? I mean, I'm really curious on your opinions on this. I just think for some reason they've decided that 30k is the setting for all the sort of dry kind of grim stuff instead of the fun. Where's the fun, the colour, the excitement, the stuff? You know, grimdark's fine, but you've got to have some. That's why I prefer the earlier days of Games Workshop a bit, because there was a sense of humour. You know, you've got to have a laugh amongst all the grimness and darkness. Anyway, individual players can add that as much as they want, and I assure you, as you can see from any one of my battle reports, that we add that all the time. Having a laugh is very important. So, let's open the box. Sorry I'm rabbiting on so much, but I'm very excited about this, and, you know, I just want to talk about it. If you're not interested, just turn off. No, don't turn off, come back. So, this is what you get in the box when you open it up, and the first thing you see are the old sort of whippy-snippy kind of rulers, measuring rulers. They haven't changed in the slightest from the earliest days. Now, if I open up Adeptus Titanicus, I mean, they must have made 20 gazillion of these things. No, actually, I'm wrong. Adeptus Titanicus, I'd forgotten, had these things, which are these fantastic clear measuring sticks. Pretty advanced stuff for 1988. But if we go into Epic, just bear with me for a moment. There they are. Exactly the same, absolutely exactly the same. Though I've got to say these ones were centimetres and these are inches, which for some reason back in the day when they did Epic, they thought, you know, let's get metric and go to centimetres. I don't think it was ever a popular thing. There's something about inches and miniatures gamers. So here they are, the old whippersnipper measuring things in inches, and this will, you know, really take those old gamers back. As will these old templates. Don't have these in Warhammer 40k anymore, but these are the same templates. They have not changed these things at all. They're exactly the same. So they're probably using the same molds because the stainless steel molds for these plastic things just last forever. So there you go, the old templates. Then you got the figures. Now, this is a good time to talk about what happened with that whole delay business and why it took so long for us to get Legions Imperialis. I actually got one of these sets quite a long time ago. I haven't looked up exactly how long, but it was a good few months ago. And I've started painting it, and I haven't finished yet because there's this barrage of stuff to do here at the Esoteric Order of Games. So I got started on learning the rules and going through it all. And then I got an email from Games Workshop saying, we are recalling the book. And I went, wow, that's a really big deal, because, you know, this is from all over the world. All the content creators that they sent copies of Legion Imperialis to, they asked to send back the book. Now, obviously, there were some errors in it. Now, rumours have swirled around the internet, of course, as they do for these kind of things. And nobody knows exactly why. There was some talk that there was some politically charged language that was insensitive and they took out. If so, good on them. There was also talk that there were some rules that were very wrong, so they decided to replace. Good on them. So whatever it was, I'm sure their reasons were, well, they must have been good reasons, because they recalled all of them and they reprinted them. And I said, actually to them, I sent back an email and I said, I tell you what, I will just send you a video of me burning the book in the fireplace if you want, and that'll save you a lot of money in postage, because I'm down in New Zealand. And they said, no, we've got to have the books back. So they were very strict about making sure all those books got back to them, so they could no doubt stick them in a landfill or pulp them or do whatever they do, or hopefully recycle them all. So that cost them, you know, a good few bucks to send it back from New Zealand to the UK. So I can't imagine how much that cost. And then they had to reprint the games, and then they'd have to open up all the boxes and replace the books. Must have cost a fortune. So there must have been a good reason for it, and I presume somebody is very much in the bad books over at Games Workshop for making a mistake, or perhaps a group of people. Anyway, that's why it was all delayed. Now, to my great surprise, instead of just sending me back the book, they sent me a new set. I went, fantastic. Now, whether this was done for logistical reasons, because it was just easier that way, or they did it as a sort of, oh, sorry, it took so long kind of thing to content creators, I don't know. But I'm really pleased they did, because I've got double the number of miniatures now. And I can, you know, do some good battle reports for you. So these are the miniatures. That's the story. Hope that wasn't too boring. These are all the miniatures. I'll go into these in detail in a moment. But of course, you've got your Traitor Legion and you've got your Solar Auxilius. I have no idea who the Solar Auxilius is, because I don't follow the background in great detail. But, you know, they're Imperial troops, basically. Personally, I kind of would have preferred the old-fashioned Imperial Guard kind of troops, but I guess they're kind of the same thing, basically. I don't know. People who are really into the background fluff of Warhammer 40k will be going, oh my god, he doesn't even know who the Solar Auxilius is. One thing, when you take out these miniatures, be very careful, because some can fall off the sprue, and they're tiny little buggers. Look at the size of that. That's one of the troops. Tiny, tiny thing. So be very careful you don't lose them as you take out the sprue. I mean, in your excitement, don't throw them all over the room, because you may be throwing little Solar Auxilius men into the corners of your room, never to be found again. So I'll carefully place those over there. Now, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 sprues there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 sprues. And I've got a couple of little guys here. So again, be super careful you don't lose those. Then we've got our little protective sheet thing as usual. And here's the book that caused all the problems. And it's a beautiful big hardback, as you can see. Lovely. It's got a bookmark in there as usual, ribbon bookmark. Really nice. Now, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but it's lovely. You know, when I said the graphic design of these ones are not as good as the others, I guess that's a bit of an exaggeration. But they do tend to be huge slabs of text, as you can see. It's just walls of text. And also, I'll go into this later, I just find the rules writing a bit plodding. I mean, it goes to so much effort to cover every contingency that it tends to be very repetitive, kind of old school Warhammer writing. Yeah, it's just that fun element again. Anyway, that comes down to how you play the game. We'll go into that later. So what do we have here? This is mysterious. I don't know what this is. I haven't seen this before. Oh, okay. They've put the counters in. Oh, that's right. Now, this is a con. I'm not too impressed with this at all. Look at this flimsy, cheap counter sheet. I mean, guys, what is going on here? It's just absolutely, it's kind of useless. So what are they doing here? Is this so they can sell premium counters later on? I don't know, because these will last about a day. I'm really disappointed in this. This is a premium product. There's a lot of stuff here, and they put in this, it's almost paper. Look at that. It's just really thin. So that's a real disappointment. I don't know what they're thinking, because the counters are very important in this game. You're laying down orders for all your units. So you're using these counters a lot. I guess they're going to sell premium counters. But yeah, big disappointment. Not too happy about that. We've got some reference sheets, which are just huge slabs of text. And again, when you're doing a reference sheet, and I know how to do reference sheets, having done 450 of them, keep the information a little bit more succinct. You don't have to say all this. I mean, it's got here, round sequence, orders phase. Players issue an order to each of their detachments, placing a token face down next to them or on the army roster. Once this is done, players reveal all orders. Do you really need to go into all that verbose detail on a reference sheet? You need to say, orders phase, players issue an order to each of their detachments. Then reveal all. Then players reveal all orders. Whatever. You can make it a lot shorter. And you know, on a reference sheet, you don't need to go into the detail of placing them next to them or on the army roster. That's just only one example. But you know, if it's a reference sheet, make it succinct. Don't just grab slabs of text out of the rulebook and put it on a reference sheet. Make it short and sweet, because you can look up the detail in the rulebook if you need to. And after you've played a few times, you're hardly going to be referring to that anyway. Gee, I'm a bit critical today, aren't I? Well, you know, this is a big deal for me, Epic coming back, and I just want to see it done well. You've got a little transfer sheet there. This seems to have, I see there's transfers for various traitor legions. Looks like some there for some banners. And legionnaires, astartes, stuff like that, solar auxilia, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you've got your instruction book, of course, for putting it together. Now, I've already put some of this together. They're surprisingly fiddly for little guys. Obviously, the troops themselves are all individual ones. There's not much construction going on there, except that you have sort of 5 on a base, or is it 5 on a base, 4 on a base? No, 5, sorry. 5 on a base. But the things like the contempted dreadnoughts and the tanks and everything have a surprising number of bits for such tiny figures. So it's a little bit fiddly. Those with fat fingers may have a little bit of problems. We've got the old inserters, of course. A whole lot of bases. Now, these bases are nice because they're thinner than normal bases, which is great because it keeps it sort of in scale. If you had the normal thick bases, it would look a bit silly. These are thin bases, and they've got a sort of, well, I'll show you later, but they've got a kind of generic kind of concrete kind of look to them. It's good. You've got 2 bases for your Warhound Titans, which are nice. Again, cracked pavement and everything, which are really nice and thin. Now, of course, the only thing is you can use, or you will be using, if you have it, Adeptus Titanicus models in Epic, and they don't have these thin bases. So that's just something you're going to have to live with, or you could maybe magnetize them. I don't know. But so far, we don't have these available separately, but I'm sure they will be. And of course, you've got a pack of the old dice, just normal dice, and you've got a scatter dice in there as well. So far, it's kind of old schooly because you've got these and you've got templates. And having had a quick look through the rules, it is very old schooly. And as I said, they tend to put these old school games into the Horus Heresy setting. I think it's a slight opportunity missed. This is just my first impression. It's a slight opportunity missed. The great thing about Epic, and it's just really summed up by this cover, is the colour and the excitement and all the different aliens and everything. I mean, are they going to do more with this? Are they going to bring in the orcs and all the other races? Probably not, unless Epic is a huge, huge success. Will they, go on to do all those factions, which is a real shame, I think. It's just going to be Horus Heresy. It's going to be humans against humans. And yeah, the good thing about this, from my personal perspective, is that I can still play the old game if I want to do that. And I want to still have that colour and excitement and all the different races and the fun aspect where it's less serious. This is obviously a more serious kind of thing. It's more grimdark. It's all about this Horus Heresy thing that is just so dominant in all of the Warhammer 40,000 background. Anyway, now, as I said, the only thing I'm super disappointed about are these counters, which are ridiculously thin. The next thing we're going to do now is have a look through the rule book and talk about the rules. And we'll see what's going on in this new edition of Legions Imperialis. That'll bring this video to a close, but later on, when I've painted them up, I'm going to do another video showing you my painted figures. And then after that, hopefully a battle report. So, stay tuned for more Legions Imperialis stuff because I'm still excited about playing Epic. Epic's really cool. But for now, let's get into that big rule book. Okay, my friends, are you ready to talk about rules? Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive here, but I do want to go through the rules to give you an idea of how Epic plays in this new iteration. And the funny thing is, of course, is that some of the rules go back way, way, way to Adeptus Titanicus, the original one in 1988, which just goes to show, really, when it comes to using old rules and revitalising them, Games Workshop is a master. A lot of their core systems go back 45 years, which is quite astonishing, really, and goes to show that they were pretty well designed in the first place. Whatever you might have in the way of personal opinions when it comes to rolling too many dice sometimes. But you're going to find that there's a step missing from this one, which is fantastic. But we'll get onto that later. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's have a look at the book. Now, I won't go through it individual pages-wise because I just want to give you an overview. And a lot of the pages are just heavy on text, pages like that. And in fact, it's laid out in a way that it makes sure that each chunk is on a separate page. So you'll often get pages, let's see if I can find one, where there's just a little bit of text and then something like that, as you can see. There's a bit of text here, and then half the page is just a little bit of background illustration, because if you're going over to the next page, it shows all the orders and it wants to get them all on one page, which is a pretty good thing to do, but it does make for a very big book. That they're not filling it every single page with text. So it starts off, and I quite like this concept. There's not too much of the background material. It sort of does add to that feeling of dryness a little bit, but there is only 20 pages of background at the start. There's an imperial timeline for these early days, the 30K period that the Horus Heresy is set in. So there's a little bit about the history before the Emperor, hardly anything really. The Emperor comes in, he does the Grand Crusade, the Horus Heresy happens. That's where we enter the story and start our battles. There's a nice map of the Imperium of Mankind, as you can see at the time, and as I said, a timeline. And then we get straight into the rules. Now, one little thing I do like is that there's a nod to old players here on page 28. Where is it? Here we go. Commanders of old and princeps of new. So if you're a veteran of Games Workshop games, you may remember a few other games that bear some of the mechanics. Epic Space Marine. It says the rules contained within are inspired by those earlier games, and every effort has been made to retain the feeling of the original games while updating them with new mechanics and renewing them for a new era. For some readers, this rulebook will feel like an age come again. Isn't that nice? I really like that. It just makes, it's kind of welcoming to the old players. And it also says that, there are other games, of course, set within the Horus Heresy period. There's Warhammer the Horus Heresy, there's Adeptus Titanicus, and there's also Aeronautica Imperialis. These names. Now, I must admit, I haven't ever played Aeronautica Imperialis. Gee, they're tongue twisters, these ones. Which is, of course, is the aircraft battles. You can use those aircraft in battles of Legions Imperialis. I wish they'd just call it epic scale. I mean, Legions Imperialis. It does not roll off the tongue. Anyway, you can use those aircraft. So I'm tempted to get hold of some to add to this game, though I don't think it was a huge seller and probably hard to get hold of now. They must be still selling it. Anyway, you can use those. So that's all in the Horus Heresy. So you can see how they've really put all these games into that time period. And I think, having a think about this, I think the whole idea is that they don't have to use all those factions. So they can keep this very self-contained, just have human forces, Imperial against traitor, and they don't have to bring in all those other forces because it would be a huge amount of resources to create all those other factions. So there you go. That's probably one of the reasons. So moving on, we've got a nice setup here as a sample. Now it says that the typical table is 5 feet by 4 feet, and the typical point range you're looking at is 2,500 to 3,000 points per player. Now I believe in the set you've got something around 700 points either side. And I think that Solar Auxilius, no, was it the Solar Auxilius side had more points? I've forgotten now. I will check that out and find out. One of the, in other words, they're unbalanced. One of them has about 100 points more than the other one. So they're not perfectly balanced forces. And also the armies that you have, there's not enough actual forces to justify the fact that you're including a Titan as well, if you want to really stick with the rules, because you have to have a certain number of forces before you can add a Titan, all that kind of stuff. So really, you probably need a couple of sets to get up there. And even then, you're not really getting up to the 2,500 to 3,000 point scores. So they're really expecting you're going to get into this in a big way. There is a certain investment involved. And I know there are also some really nice terrain tiles coming down the pipeline, except if they're a foot by a foot and you need 20 of them for a 5 by 4 table, they don't come in sets of 20. I forget how much are in one set, but you're going to need a lot. So, you know, you probably want to make your own table. The tiles are probably very cool, but you'll need lots of sets of them to get a basic 5 by 4 table happening. Let's move on. We get straight into the rules then, and there's a whole lot of stuff on core principles and basic stuff, which, you know, takes up a lot of space. Look at that. There's hardly, you know, whole half pages here with nothing in them. It's probably a little bit unnecessary. You could have fitted that base-to-base contact bit down there and saved a page, but what do I know? Anyway, so there's all the basic stuff like that. It is quite wordy. Let's look at an example. I've got one here on page 32. You've got a whole page here introducing core principles, and it has stuff like this. Before going further, it is worth establishing some core principles and conventions in regards to commonly used terms, dice, in the game of Legions Imperialis in general. What is that? That's just verbiage. It's absolutely unnecessary. Note the following pages introduce many terms that are explained later in greater detail. Where relevant, they will include page references. If you are not yet familiar with Legions Imperialis, you may need to do a little flicking back and forth through this rulebook to get the full picture. Oh, come on. You know, you're not going to have people who have never played these games before casually picking up a copy of Legions Imperialis in a bookstore, and you just don't need all that extra stuff. It's crazy. I don't know why there's a house style going in on Games Workshop to write like that. It annoys me as someone who is very interested in writing and in summarizing rules. That kind of stuff is just taking up space. And really, you don't need this page at all. It's taking up a whole page, and it's just saying, these are the core principles. Well, you've said that with the heading core principles. Drives me bonkers. Anyway, I won't go on about that, but there's a lot of that in this rule book. I really think you could reduce this to half the size. And I think that they pad it out a lot. And it's not about succinct rules. It's about blah, 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 blah. It's a little complaint of mine. Anyway, let's get on to the rules. So basically and I won't go through the pages as I say this, I'm just going to tell you what the basic rules are. So you've got models. Now, model can be a number of figures on a single base. So in the case of infantry, you have 5 figures on a base, and that base is a model. That's referred to as a model. Now, models are put together in detachments, which are a number of models make up a detachment, and then a number of detachments make up a formation. And of course, a number of formations make up your army. Another thing about basic rules here is that this does have model's eye view line of sight, which is pretty funny when the models are kind of this big. So you're really going to have to get down there on the table if you want to check some crucial bit of line of sight. I remember in the old days, people used to have periscopes and then make their own periscopes, which is a square box with, you know, a mirror in the top and a mirror down the bottom, and you put it on the table and put it at the actual head height of the model, which would be particularly handy in this case, don't you think? Games Workshop should make a periscope so you can see down at that tiny level, because, you know, when you've got your head flat on the table, which you won't be able to do because there's a whole lot of terrain, it'll be hard to see. Anyway, there you go. Now, excuse me while I refer to my notes because there's a lot here. So you get to the data sheets. Now, let me show you those. There's a data sheet. And you can see it's a pretty dry looking thing. Now these are available in separate packs, and I'm a little bit peeved about that. I think that the 2 packs of data sheets should have gone in this box, along with nice thick counters. It really is a bit of a starter set. They're not sort of, again, like Adeptus Titanicus, they seem to actually put a premium price on getting into these systems. Adeptus Titanicus was super expensive, and this one is too. When you buy a big box set with miniatures in it like this, and a big hardcover book, I think the least you can expect is detachment cards as well. To have to buy them separately seems a bit rough. I know I'm being critical today, but these things are important. So detachment sheets. Now in this you've got your detachment size, so how many models are in your detachment. You've got your basic abilities, which are movement, your save, your close assault factor, which is in melee, a morale, and wounds. And then you've got your weapons, and they have range, dice to hit, armor piercing or armor penetration, and the traits. And then you can, it tells you how many points the detachment is, but you can spend extra points to increase the detachment size or get other upgrades and things like that. They also have special rules. There are heaps and heaps of special rules and weapon traits and stuff like that. So there's all your basic information on your detachment. So let's get into how you play the game, and it's all about these orders. And again, this goes way back to Adeptus Titanicus, the original game, and this brilliant idea they came up with. I think it was Jervis Johnson who wrote the original rules, and they're just genius because you play these orders on your different detachments, you play them all face down, everyone reveals them at the same time, and then you have to execute those orders throughout the particular phases of the game. It's absolute genius. Now the orders are first fire, advance, march orders, charge orders, or fallback orders. Fallback orders are different in that you don't place them yourself. You replace one of your orders with a fallback order if that's warranted for some reason. So if you place first fire orders, that means you can't move, but you can fire during the first fire phase of the combat phase. If you're assigned advance orders, your detachment can move, but they can also fire during the advancing fire step of the combat phase. If you do march orders, you can move a lot faster, but you can't fire. You can move up to twice your move value. If you're infantry, you can move up to 3 times your move value. So you can really get up quick to the objectives and get into battle and all the rest of it. If you have charge orders, you can move up to your move value, or if you're charging into base contact with an enemy, you can move up to twice your move value. You're not allowed to fire, but you get +1 to your fight rolls. And as I said, fallback orders replace other orders, and they'll basically mean that you'll be fleeing in the end phase. Okay, so after you've placed your orders and revealed them, you move to the initiative phase, where you just roll off to see who gets the initiative. Then you have the movement phase, which is dictated by the orders, of course, that you have. You take turns activating your detachments, which is great. So there's back and forth. There's not one person doing all their turns and then followed by the next person, which is fantastic. So you alternate activating your detachments. Now, you can be engaged if you're in base-to-base combat, in which case your movement is extremely limited. You can be engaged in pinned, which means you're engaged by models which are the same scale and above. And that means you can't really do anything because you're engaged in pinned, or you can't move anyway. You can fight, of course. If you've charged, you can do a pile-in move to get everything into the right positions that you want to get it in. There's also a small overwatch system as well, so you can do overwatch during the movement phase if you've got advance or first fire orders, and you'll get -2 to hit, but you can take a pot shot when the enemy's moving. Then we go on to the combat phase. This is broken into 3 steps. There's the first fire step, which means that detachments on first fire orders can fire. There's the engagement phase, where the melee combat takes place, and then there's the advancing fire phase, where detachments with advance orders can fire as long as they're not engaged and pinned. Combat is pretty straightforward, which is great. If you're firing, you roll a number of dice equal to your weapon's dice characteristic. You have to meet or exceed the 2 hit value. The defender allocates the hits, and then they get to make saves. No to wound step. Yay! Yep, it's just hitting and saving. Fantastic. And that's how it should be, in my opinion. But we've had that argument before. I can see some people going, oh, I love the 2 wound step. It's just not Warhammer 40k without the 2 wound step. Yes, it is. When you get into the melee combat, you have to pair off your models. So models pair off with one another. Of course, one model can be paired off with several other models. And then the player with initiative chooses a model to do any combats with, any models that it's paired off with. And both players roll a 2d6 and add your close assault factor, and the loser suffers a wound. Super simple, super fast, absolutely love it. That's really, really good. Oh, and by the way, if you're involved in multiple combats, every time that model fights, their opponent gets an extra d6. So yeah, you can get piled in on really badly. After all the combats are finished, you add up who won the most fights, and the loser of that has to make a morale check. If they fail, they're going to withdraw a d6 plus their move rate. Now, of course, there are morale rules as well. Formation as a whole, once it reaches its break point, which is half of its original number of models, it's considered broken, and that means it can only do an advance or a charge order, and it gets -1 on any morale test for its individual detachments. The individual detachments can make morale checks if their casualties get to half or more, and if they fail, they get a fallback order, which means in the end phase, they will be fleeing. In the end phase, we've got fallback and fleeing, end phase effects. You remove any flyers from the board, and then you count up your victory points. And that's basically the rules. They're not too complicated, which is great. As usual, all the complexity is added by heaps and heaps of weapon traits and special rules. And there are pages and pages of those, of course. The rest of the rules is taken up by specialist stuff. There's a couple of pages on Titans. There's 9 pages on terrain. So there's a lot to do with terrain. Terrain is very important in this game, obviously, and there is no terrain in the box set, so you'll have to buy all that or make it separately. You've also got missions. There are 12 missions in the book. Let's find those missions. There they are there. Top missions. You've got some secondary objectives info, and then the rest of the book, and there's a huge chunk of it. There's some very nice feature battlefields there, Industrial City and Ruin City. But all of this is your army lists for the Adeptus Astartes, either Imperium or Traitor, and of course the Solar Auxilius, who are the Imperium troops, and you've got Titans and Knights and everything as well, all detailed in the back there. So all the detachment lists, and basically how to put armies together as well. These are how the detachments make up various formations, that kind of gritty info, so you can work out all your point scores to your heart's content. At the end, you've got some nice showcases of painted figures by different painters, which are quite lovely. Give you some inspiration for doing your own. I'm very pleased that I've already painted my Titans, so I can just plonk them into games of this. But some good inspiration there. Now, I was going to go with the Death Guard for my Traitor Legion, and I've started painting all the tanks and everything in that scheme, and then I've changed my mind and I've decided I'm going to go Horus Heresy because they're just a little bit more distinctive than the Death Guard. I just like the colour a bit more, and they just seem a little bit more old schooly to me. I don't know. There you go, folks. Quite a lot of detail there. I hope it wasn't too boring, but I hope it also gives you a bit of an overview of how you play Legions Imperialis. As for the models, I mean, they're really nice. They're very, very detailed. They're absolutely lovely. The scale is amazing, but they're pretty easy to paint as well because you just have to either do a wash technique or a dry brush technique or both. And you can paint them pretty quickly. When you're doing the sprues, I highly recommend you paint them while they're still on the sprues. And I think they've thought of this because all the mold points, the injection mold points, are actually on the bases or the feet rather than the tops, which is fantastic because it doesn't matter if you paint them first and then just clip them off and then put them on the bases together, which is really, really good. So you'll find it a lot easier than trying to hold every individual little model. I'll go into more detail about the models in my next video because then I'm going to show you my painted armies, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope this hasn't been too long-winded, but I'm very excited about Legions Imperialis, very excited about getting back into the epic scale, Warhammer 30k in this case. And even though I do think it's missing a bit of the old fun and humour and colour and spectacle of the old days, well, I shouldn't say spectacle. This will still look spectacular when it's all set up and you're playing. It just doesn't have a bit of that fun. It's a bit too grimdark for me, but other people love that stuff, so that's just a matter of opinion. I'll see you in the next video where I'll be talking more about Legions Imperialis. Until then, good gaming, everybody, and bye for now.